Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It has been a long day, and you must be really tired, and I really appreciate that you're making time to be here. So I am an educational psychologist with an interest in adolescence in particular. So you will hear a lot about like a school transition and early adolescence, and naturally peer relationship is one of the key interests of mine. So I'm going to talk about the impact or the importance of social dynamics when we think about school adjustment or academic success in general. So my goal today is if I can kind of convince you or persuade you a little bit that we actually have to think about social elements in the environment or in the relationship. And those are important if we want to have our students to help students to be really successful in school. So I'm a motivation researcher, and if you step into any classrooms, it's not that hard to identify very motivated students from not so motivated students, right? You can just tell, right? Sometimes you can see a student who have some kind of invisible screen in front of their face, and then they're kind of daydreaming, or they might be actually doing something else, right? But I want to kind of give you a disclaimer. So from the plenary session, we talked about like intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So motivation can be really high and low. Those are kind of quantity of motivation, but we also have to think about the quality of motivation. There is good motivation that we want that our students to have, but there's also a bad motivation. It might be very high, but we don't want that kind of motivation. So if you look at the students, you can kind of infer their motivation. Motivation is a hypothetical construct. You can't really see it, right? We can only infer by observing students' behaviors or their emotions, right? Or if we can kind of see their work, we can kind of infer their cognitive processes or strategies that they have used. So we can only do that. So you can kind of observe are they interested? Or, how do they react to their outcomes? Maybe some students are really upset after getting an A-, but other students might be totally happy just by passing the class with a C or C+. And you all have seen those, right? So, or how do they approach learning? Do they use deep strategies or very superficial or memorization, that kind of strategies? And then affect during the engagement, do they look happy, having fun, or do they feel bored, or kind of, feel dreadful, or kind of, almost angry that they have to be there? You can see all of those things, right? And how much effort do they put in? And are they resilient after experiencing some setbacks or drawbacks? Do they persist? And those kind of things will tell us a lot about their motivation. So, another thing that I often have to say, really like explicitly, is that motivation is a soft factor, but also very malleable. And people think, cognitive factors such as IQ will determine everything, but that is not true, right? Equally competent students can really perform differently depending on their level of motivation. And we know that these are kind of you can alter that through intervention. That kind of draws a lot of attention from us because we can do something about it. It's easier to change and work on the motivation rather than trying to enhance their IQ. Right? So here's one student who is trying to answer all of the questions that the teacher is asking, right? Why? And there might be another student who just, when will this end? Or I work a lot with the middle school students, and then sometimes I see students have like, you can't make me do anything kind of written on their face, right? And I'm not gonna listen to you, right? So it's very hard. But what are the reasons behind this, motivation or amotivation or lack of motivation? So the motivation researchers have a kind of one model answer that can explain the motivation or lack of it. And there are kind of, the general answer is there are kind of two categories of reasons. And one is about the task, the belief about the task itself. You have to be interest in what you're learning, right? You have to like what you're learning, and you have to see the value of what you're learning. So all these like a task-related beliefs is one category, and the other category is self-belief. You may have heard all these terms such as self-esteem, self-efficacy, self-concept, or self-worth. Those are all about the beliefs about oneself. Can I do this? So the motivation will be really low if either one of them is very low. So for optimal motivation, students have to feel it's worth doing it, and I can actually do it, right? So those are the kind of one of the most common answer that the motivation researchers have been developing over the last several decades, right? But then, is that all? So today, I would like to highlight that actually, let's think about the social part, social dynamics, the relationships, or the classroom environment, or group climates. And those are also an important determinants of school classroom engagement or school judgment. So actually, I was really amused when our plenary speaker talks about these Taiwanese classrooms. No talking, right? Keep working, focus, right? So I think it's a very common, like if you talk to other students, that's not working, right? So learning is something that you do, not do with other students, right? The socializing is playing, and working is doing something on your own, right? But we all know that this is not true. Learning is a very social process. And this is, how many of you have seen this? Maybe a lot of you, right? So this is one of the classic theory of motivation, and it has its own share of flaws, but what this is telling us is the humans are primarily social being before we can be an intellectual being or aesthetic being, right? We have to feel cared for, we have to feel that we belong before we can actually feel like doing something wonderful. So this just tells us that we must think about social aspect of human motivation. So here's another common, mistakes or oversights by the researchers. When researchers try to study students' engagement, they often measure very independent and individual engagement. Or does students work really hard? Does students pay attention to teachers? Or do they go, show off-task behaviors? Or do they upset teachers and violate classroom rules, right? Those are very individual part of engagement. But, engagement can be very social, and they're very important, right? Learning is basically the exchange of ideas and co-learning with partners, learning from someone, learning with someone. So one of the outcome measures that I've been frequently studying is academic help seeking with teacher or amongst peers. So when you don't know what to do, what is the better strategy than just sitting passively or just waiting for the teacher to move on to something else? You must ask for help, right? Otherwise, you're just wasting time. And often in subject matters that require some kind of sequential learning, if you miss certain part, you will never get to understand the next part. So you must kind of resolve that gap in your understanding. To do that, you have to ask for help. But often, they don't, right? Because, and this is not really captured by researchers a lot, because it kind of involves partner. And the researchers tend to just measure this kind of engagement rather than what do they do in classroom when they do the group work or discussion. And then how do they share, how do they work with other people. And those are all social forms of engagement that we must attend to. And often, students make a very important academic decisions or even the career decisions based on the social reasons. And we have a saying in Korean, like 친구 따라 강남 간다. Like you follow your buddy, right? And it's not just true in Asian culture. I've seen this a lot in America too. Like they actually make a decision like which college to go to based on whether their friends are going there, something like that. So students make a lot of like which group project do you want to work on? They think about who will be in that team, right? And I want to spend time with so and so, so I'll just pick that project, right? Or even the topic. I have to do a science project. Which topic should I work on? Well, I have to ask Suyang what she's working on because I want to work with her, right? There are social reasons, and then oftentimes there are academic reasons like, oh, I like this topic, so I want to work on that. But there's also social reasons, and sometimes this could be a predominant reason for academic decisions. So I hope that I kind of made a case that the social part is actually an important part of students' life in school, and also important determinant for academic motivation and engagement and eventual achievement. So this is a common model. In students' motivation and overall school adjustment is a function of individual factors such as task values and then self-beliefs, but also the contextual factors. All this, each context should provide enough support for students to be optimally function, right? But each of these contexts, there are social relationships, and then the group dynamics and cultures and norms. So we have to think about those. They're not just kind of in addition to, they actually interact with each other. The context will impact students' individual beliefs, and that will also impact it will change the context. We know everybody knows that, the triarchic model from Bandura's model. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly about some studies, a few studies that I have done to show that the quality of social relationships or the reward structure within the classroom or the approaches to social relationships or peer climates and how they all impact students' motivation and engagement. But I would like to spend a little bit more time on this part since that's the most recent study that I'm actually conducting. And I found that really fascinating, and I want to share that. So I'll actually go really fast because I think I have 15 minutes and I have a few studies to go through. So can I just ask a quick survey, take a quick survey. How many of you heard of this theory, goal orientation theory? How many have never heard of this theory? Okay, half and half. So I'll just because I'll kind of explain and you'll see these constructs appearing in multiple studies. So I'm gonna just give you a quick overview of achievement goal orientation theory. And this is one of the, maybe you have heard self-determination theory, right? So this is another theory that is really widely used. And maybe over the last 40 years, this might have been the #1 theory that has produced so many studies, right? So it basically distinguishes students' goals. It's not about I want to get 90% from this test. It's about the orientation toward competence. So there are two fundamental orientations. One is, why do you work? So one answer could be, I want to develop my competence. But the other could be, I want to show. So I want to demonstrate my competence, right? So that kind of distinguishes mastery goals from performance goals. And there's two elements under the performance goals. One can be approach, and the other could be avoidance. So approach is, I want to show how competent I am to other people. I want to impress other people. I want to garner very positive and favorable judgment from other people. But avoidance counterpart is kind of similar, but it's just kind of more focusing on the negative outcomes. I want to avoid. I want to conceal my incompetence. I don't want other people find out that I do not know or cannot do this. So their focus is, they don't try to win. They just try to avoid being the loser, right? So that's a similar but kind of two sides of the one thing. And the classroom goal structure is, so your environment can really enforce and encourage mastery goals. And we call it, if your classroom teacher can do a lot of things to kind of alter and influence students' goal orientation, and if the classroom is doing a lot to kind of foster and promote mastery goal, we call it mastery goal structure. And if doing the other thing, then it will call it performance goal structures. And the social achievement goals is the same thing, but achievement goal orientation theory is applied to social domains. So when you interact with social partners, friends, your focus could be, oh, I want to be seen as popular, I want to demonstrate my social competence, or I want to avoid looking like a nerd, or look inadequate. Like that could be avoidance part of performance goals. And we have different labels, but the fundamental ideas are same. And then the social mastery, we call it social development goal. The focus is I want to be a better friend. I want to learn how to become a better listener. I want to know how to improve our relationship. What is, figuring out what is good for the relationship and that kind of things, right? So obviously you can see that the mastery goals or social development goals are really good thing, very healthy beliefs, and compared to performance counterparts. And academic help seeking can also be good or bad. We want students to talk to their friends and ask for help, but we want them to ask questions in an appropriate way, right? We want them to actually ask questions so they can learn from peers, so that they can do it independently in the future, rather than, what is the answer? Can I just write it down, right? That's almost cheating. So we call the first type as adaptive help seeking, but the second type as expedient help seeking. Also, we know that, when students clearly needs one, they might be afraid that the other students think that they are incompetent, so they know that they need help, but may not ask for help. So that's a problem. And teachers actually acknowledge that. Asking for bad form of help seeking is bad, but also not asking for help is bad. So we want students to ask help, but the good kind of, or right kind of help. So the first study that I'm going to talk about kind of test really effect of classroom goal structures. Well, can everybody win in this classroom? Or the teacher really try to make sure who is better than others, right? Those are performance goal structure. What does it do? And then the second one is, teachers are just really burdened with all kinds of things and they're stressed. And we want to know if teacher actually provide emotional support to their students. Does that matter? If you can be a very cold machine who knows a lot about physics, is that all, right? If some of you are parents, you may understand where I'm coming from. When you have a teacher for your kid, the first question that you may come up with is not, is the teacher competent? Often the first question that you want to ask is he or is she nice, right? So I wanted to see whether these two mattered. So that kind of I already put the answers there. I'll skip the method part, but I just want to show you the findings. So this is a longitudinal study with about 1,000 students recruited from 15 elementary schools, and they were followed for 2 years, and they moved to 2 middle schools. Actually, there were 3 middle schools in that district, but 1 middle school just decided to drop out at last minute. So we lost a lot of students, 1/3 of the students, but we still had a very big sample. And then we followed them, and then we kind of ran the growth curve analysis. So we could see what is changing over time, and we saw for adaptive help seeking, you can see that if teacher emphasize mastery goals, the students, the change of adaptive help seeking is positive. It's kind of improved. Actually, not really improving, because around the middle school transition, everything goes down. It just kind of does not go down as fast, right? It just, things look bad. And then if the teacher emphasizes if teacher provides emotional support, it also has a very positive effect on the slope of the growth trajectory. And for the experience help seeking, we found that the teacher's performance goal had a positive effect on the slope. That means if the, in the competitive classroom environment, students tend to actually just ask for, give me the answer, right? So I can get it done quickly and maybe get good grade. But actually I have another study that show then, despite the short-term gain, their actual achievement did not improve. Obviously, for obvious reason, they didn't learn. So that's the first study. And then the second study shows what social goals do, right? So social goals are approach to social relationships. And this study was conducted with the students who live in one dormitory. So they just kind of got into the university. And I'm not sure about the case here, but in this particular school, all students had to live in a dorm for the first year. So everybody was there. So they were kind of living with their peers, right? And then each building, actually on each floor, there was graduate student resident advisors. So they kind of supervise their undergrad students who are the first year in college, right? So we measured those students' social achievement goals, and then after 6 months, after a resident advisor kind of have enough time to know their students on their floor, we asked them to rate their students' competence, social competence, and also kind of psychological well-being. And this is what we have found. So this is not the self-report, so you can't really say these are the shared variances. So these are the ratings from the third party or independent rater. And then you can see that the social demonstration avoidance goal is really bad, right? The social competence was negative and they don't help other students and they're not popular, they're anxious, they cry a lot. It's all bad. And then the social demonstration approach goal was really interesting that they looked very competent. And they seem to have a high kind of status in the peer group. They look very popular, and they don't look very sad or anything like that. But they also look very aggressive. So when students really focus on being seen as cool or popular, they might be very strategic when they kind of interact with their friends. They're not nice to everybody. They'll pick, well, Soo-young is actually very important in this group. I might just hang out with her and be nice to her, but so-and-so is not that important. I might just kind of bully her, right? So actually we've seen some of those too with other data. In this study, we found this social development goal was possibly related to social competence, although the effect tend to be generally weak, but we have seen kind of repeatedly social development goal was not related to popularity, but was likability, right? So the social relationship can have two phases. One is that student is powerful or influential or cool, but the other side of social relationship could be everybody like that person. Everybody want to hang out with that person, right? So those are two sides of social relationships, and then the development goal tend to predict likability, and demonstration approach goal tend to predict popularity. But it comes with a cost, right? And some data shows that they actually worry a lot too, although they look very confident. And there are other evidence that shows social achievement goals actually impact academic engagement as well. More studies on that. And then there's another study that shows the group culture or the group norm is also important. So the peer climate can be very hostile, and you may be able to actually feel it when you enter the classroom and talk to some of the students. Can be they're not really cohesive, there's no cohesive group, and they hate each other, they don't help each other. There are other classrooms that the peers are very nice to each other, they like each other to be successful, they help. And those were actually predicted by the classroom environment that is mastery focused, as you can predict. Okay. So I'll just skip. And now this is a study that I'm very excited about. So this is about like, what's the, like so far I've been talking about the social relationship that you have with the real person in your classroom, teachers, or what teacher does, or what is the relationship with your friends, that kind of things. But here, perceived similarity, it's kind of, you have a random person, and then how you view that person, does that person look similar to you? Maybe appearance, maybe some other factors, right? How does that alter your attitudes or behaviors? Right? That's the question here. And you might kind of feel like, oh, I never heard of that kind of study, but actually you did. You have. So everybody knows this experiment, right? So there are 3 factors that predict the imitation or modeling behaviors. The first one, prestige, and then the second one is the competence, and then the third one is similarity. So the boys tend to imitate more if the model was boy, or that was just the gender in this particular experiment, but we will all know other things. This, who bought this also bought that, right? The similarity on the previous purchase behavior impact, we're more likely to buy that one or look at that one, right? Even in academic world, well, if people who read that paper also read this paper. Do you want to download it, right? And then social media, hey, you belong to this group, and everybody, so many people liked it. Do you want to press I like it too, right? These are all similarity, the effect of a perceived similarity. So we know that the similarity impact our attitudes or behaviors, but there has not been any research that applied to the academic domain, or also we don't really understand like what is the psychological process underlying this effect. Well, does that affect everybody to the same extent or not? So I wanted to study this one. So I will call this as like a people like you marketing strategy, right? And this is ongoing study, but I want to emphasize the similarity doesn't have to be something critical about critical things, like not like just the gender or these things, but something very silly. Even very silly thing can actually affect us. Like, hey, you were born in February, so and so also born in February. She liked that one, and then you were more likely to think about, oh, really, right? So the question is, could perceived similarity, this effect can be found in academic domain? And does that affect people to the same extent? Is there any moderator? You think if people have a really strong social desires or social motivation, it might hit you harder, right? Because it matters to you. So I wanted to kind of study the moderator, and there could be like some benign form of social needs. I want to be cared for, I want to belong, that kind of benign form of social need. But there could be malign form of social needs, or kind of negative form of social needs. I'm very sensitive to what other people think of me. I worry constantly about how other people judge me or evaluate me, that kind of things, right? So there are 2 kinds of social needs that are considered in this study. So the study was done with the people on the Amazon Amtrak. Have you heard of that? So you can just go have an account in Amazon, and then you can put up your survey, and then you can set some criteria. I want this kind of people, and then you pay Amazon, and then you also pay those people who do your survey. Okay, so it's very quick, and we study college students all the time, but then college students are not really representative of general population. So it's a very quick way to collect data, but you also have to do a lot of cleaning, because there's a lot of noise. People really try hard to make money. I just want females, and they will say, well, male, and they kicked out, and they change their answer, I'm female now. So it's a very difficult methodology, but novel. So we probably had to delete a lot of data because they were not authentic. So we did that. So what happened is, like before we did the manipulation, we did all this like a data collection, and then we did the kind of show people that, hey, people like you like this science text, do you find it interesting? Now, this was the general sequence. So the text that was given, this is actually science text, you know. Not really. So it's why, you know, unlike wolves, why dogs really like people, how do you kind of bond with a human? The short text about that. It's not particularly interesting, but it's not dreadful either. So, and it's very readable. So according to the indicator, it's like a 9th grade reading level, and the E score is like a 54. It's not too difficult, not too easy. So what they saw is this, but hey, we'll ask you some questions to figure out who you are, how you like, and they will actually find a science text that people like you really liked. And we did we went a long way to kind of convince them that we really did some kind of profile search and gave them, you know, maybe chose certain text that based on this profile among maybe thousands of the possible texts, when we actually had only one text. So we did this, like, you know, it spins, and we're kind of analyzing your profile. And we show them, but these are actually what they have put in. We just plugged in the information that they provided. So they thought, wow, this is really accurate. They really know me. And then, boom, we said, hey, people like you really liked it. See? We show this like statistics. People like you really found this one interesting. And that was the study. 5 minutes? Done. So this was a very interesting study, and then I'll just kind of go to the end. And then we found that actually the social motive or the social orientation or needs actually did moderate, and we found some interaction.
You have maybe less questions, so you can just wrap up.
Yeah.
So everyone can understand that.
Thank you. So I just want to say 2 things to wrap up. So the world is changing, and according to the study conducted by Oxford University in UK, 40% of the current job will disappear or replaced by machines. So we don't know what we're preparing our students for. But if you ask people what is really critical, you know, what are some of the critical skills that our students need to have, you may get some of different answers, but all the time you get the social skills. Right? Communicate with others and collaborate with others. And those are really important skills, whoever you ask. These are the common traits or the characteristics that we all think very, very important, you know, however the world will change. So I want to kind of end with these practical implications. And teachers don't really think managing the peer relationships or the classroom social environment is their job, but it is actually. If they want to really support the students' academic engagement, they must think about these elements because they are not something they can think about or something extra. This is actually fundamental and very important part of students' motivation. Okay, so I will end there. Thank you so much.
So